50% of A-League players are dissatisfied with the performance of the APL in regard to the A-League men's competition. That's one of the stark findings of the Professional Footballers Australia's latest annual report into the league. Turns out the fans are not alone. Discontent with the competition's administrator is at an all-time high. So, what can we do about it? That and more findings from the PFA's report. The Mariners and Sky Blues take on Asia again to differing levels of success. The Tillies are also in action, and Melbourne Victory announced record financial losses on this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. My name is Lachlan Avil, and joining me tonight is Christian Montegan before Sydney FC and the Matildas kick off a little bit later tonight. We're splitting this podcast in half tonight, Christian.
Yeah, good evening, Lockie. Looking forward to keeping an eye on both of the games. To be honest, I'll probably be watching a bit more of the Tillies than I will Sydney FC, but nonetheless, I'll be keeping tabs on both. And I was just saying to you before pre-recording how why is the Matildas playing 9 p.m. and I forgot that Brisbane, the time zone, they don't have daylight savings, so it's 8 p.m. their time. But yeah, nonetheless, I'll be watching for sure.
Jacob Stevens, hello to you. What's your usual multi-screen strategy? Everyone has their own quirks to it.
Yeah, well, mine's just one screen, and then lots of windows, quarters. I'll have the match in one. I'll have like SofaScore or other stat sites are available on another one. I'll have like a notepad open for my notes, and then I'll have I'll have to figure out what I'm going to have in the fourth window. Probably your lovely face, Lockie, as we live stream.
Lovely, yes, absolutely. Nice plug. It doesn't exactly work in reverse because it's out Friday morning, but in the future, we'll do more of them. As you mentioned we are making a big push over at the YouTube at the moment. We put out pretty much content every day through the work week. So Tuesday to Friday, you'll have something new to watch about your A-League football. So please get on there, do the subscription, the likes, the comments, all the follows, all that kind of stuff. We very much appreciate it. But we're going to jump in from some interesting outcomes from the PFA's annual A-League men's player survey. This was released on Tuesday morning. Now, there is one slight concession we need to make to the stat that I said in the intro. This survey was conducted with players from all of the clubs in the league in May of 2024. So you just have to remember that at that point, a lot of the positivity that was building up into the new A-League season, obviously that was still the end of the previous season, right? So I'd imagine if they did this survey today, there'd be some different results, but this is what it was at that point in time. So 50% is a massive number. That's between very and somewhat dissatisfied with the APL's management of the competition. There's a line from Jack Hingett here in the report. Quote, "The most concerning issue is the lack of consultation with players on major decisions. This affects our livelihoods as we are the ones on the field. The absence of transparency has led to a breakdown in trust between us and the APL." Christian, that's a pretty damning line.
Yeah, probably the most startling quote to come out of that report, to be honest. Because look, I mean, are we really surprised that there's a lack of transparency between the APL and the players? Because where have we seen this before? Grand final decision, hardly anyone was really informed about it. The fans weren't informed, especially, and that's what really tipped them over. And that led to sort of protests in the weeks after, and it got all really ugly. So from a player's perspective, obviously there's about 50% of the report said that they're dissatisfied in some shape or form. I assume that there would have been obviously quite a few questions in that survey to prompt that figure. So obviously a few different sort of issues that the APL hopefully look back on the report and say, okay, we've got to do this and that better. But this is probably the first step towards recognizing, okay, the players are, somewhat dissatisfied at something. But Jack Hingett's comments, what you just read out, Lockie, very concerning from, a player's point of view, because that's the last thing you want, right? To have sort of no clarification, no communication on basically anything really. So very concerning, like I said, but it's about what the APL does now. How do they resolve this issue moving forward? Do they have a meeting with the players? Do they sit down with some of them, maybe club captains, coaches, staff? I don't know how they approach it, but they've got to do something. They can't just sweep it under the carpet, that's for sure. Otherwise it really will turn into a much bigger problem than it needs to be.
I thought you were going to pull out the old step one of solving a problem is acknowledging you have one there. You got very close to it.
I just want to touch on this because it does sound quite similar actually to something that the PFA said with regards to the NST as well. And this was a few months back now, but they were saying that they had very little consultation with Football Australia in regards to what the competition was going to look like and how it was going to run and things like that. So it does seem to be like a persistent problem across both governing bodies that, you know, the players aren't perhaps having as much say as they would like in how things are going to be run.
Was that the FA for the NST or was that the AFC?
I believe it was the FA for the NST. It might have been the AFC as well.
Okay. Because the PFA have definitely released a couple of reports into the Champions League.
Yeah.
Maybe there's stuff with NST there as well. I don't know.
Maybe I'm getting confused, but it was definitely at least one of those.
It's the communication is definitely across football.
Yes.
We can agree.
Yeah.
This is definitely an issue. So here are a list of some of the things that players said were most important to growing support of the league. This is in order. This is the broadcast of the league, the atmosphere on game day, the visibility of the league, brand and marketing, and then league governance and management. It feels, Jacob, like, I don't know, a little bit of the highlight list of what we've been talking about for the last 12 months or so. It seems that the players are thinking on very similar lines to what the fans are.
But it's also funny how a lot of those things feed into each other, right? Like, you know, you get a good atmosphere by increasing the visibility of the league. How do you increase the visibility of the league? Well, through the marketing of the brand of the league. You know, what does the atmosphere do? It improves the quality of the broadcast because it makes the game look more appealing. That then in turn, you know, increases the visibility of the league. So it all just sort of a lot of those play into each other. So, you know, it does seem like, it seems like a one solution fixes all the problems sort of thing. And obviously it's not as easy as that. But, you know, I think that what the APL has done, and you mentioned obviously that this was from before the start of this new season, what they have done, I think, is absolutely nail a lot of the marketing stuff that they've done, especially in the video department. I think it's been exceptional, and they've really tapped into what makes this league different, what makes it so good, and why people love it. And they've really honed in on that rather than trying to perhaps push out a more polished image. They've gone, no, we are a crazy, you know, meme league in a way, without saying it in as many words, right? And they've brought in, you know, like the likes of Ellie Menjum to make that video, you know, the Our A-Leagues thing. Fantastic stuff. And that, I think, is a step in the right direction to addressing a lot of these issues. Obviously, the league governance management, that's a bigger issue within itself. And I think a lot of what Jack Hingott was saying there in that quote that you read out, Lockie, sort of goes to that, where it is more, at least for the players in that terms, on that side of things, sorry, it is about the communication that they have between the league management and themselves, and how they can resolve issues and things like that, which clearly, by those words, doesn't really exist in so many ways at the moment, or at least back then. But yeah, it does seem like the league are at least starting to take steps in the right direction towards addressing some of these problems, because I mean it has been a persistent problem for many years now, is that the league has almost sort of been hidden amongst the Australian sporting landscape. And you know, you think about, yes, okay, it's in summer, so it's got a competitive market, etc., but you know, it's going to be a competitive market whenever it's played in Australia, because Australia has sports throughout the year. You know, arguably AFL is, you know, the biggest sport in the country, and so, you know, winter is completely blocked out. Like, it's just a difficult spot. So I think that, yeah, what the league has done in really tapping into what makes it unique, I think that that's sort of the right move and a good step in the right direction. And it's about, you know, making it approachable and making it something that people can attach themselves to, which, you know, we've sort of seen with a lot of fan culture recently, is a lot of those PK League moments, those memes, that sort of thing. That's what gets people going. That's what gets the shares, the likes, the interactions on social media. So now to see the actual, you know, people who are running the league sort of noticing that and tapping into that, I think that that's a great thing. And I really hope that it means that they're going to continue to improve in those areas, because like I said, a lot of these things feed into each other. So with one, you know, we'll see, you know, a better brand and more marketing means the league's more visible, which means we'll see more people, which means we'll have a better atmosphere. Like, you know, that's the sort of stuff that those sort of root causes that need to be addressed. And I think, yeah, like I've said, I think the APL are making steps in the right direction in that regard.
Christian, I've been listening to the Global Game over the last couple of months. Well, maybe month, singular. But it seems like every week Simon's talking about the fact that they've asked someone from the APL to come on and talk about the state of the game and be a bit more transparent. And I understand it's a tough line for the APL to tread, because not only are they a private company, they don't have to release a lot of information. There's the moral argument that they should, which I agree with, but also that they're consciously trying to take a backward step in terms of being the ones who present the game. They want the clubs to be the ones that engage with the hardcore fans the most. So the more that they can take themselves out of the spotlight, the better from that sense. But it does feel like, to that transparency issue, the only way that we're going to answer some of these questions is about actually having some more open dialogue with the APL about it.
I get that to an extent, but there comes a point where you've put yourself into such a massive hole already, where you've got no option but to be transparent and, be open with the fans, be open about what's happening, the financial situation, how you're communicating with the players, which obviously from this report seems sort of non-existent. So it's all of this sort of stuff beforehand. It's sort of, it has to carry over now to say, okay, you've put yourself, you basically giving yourself no chances, right? You've got to come out on platforms such as the Global Game to come out and say your piece and actually be, like I said, transparent and honest about what's going on. Otherwise, if we're not, then it comes back to this sort of dishonesty argument to say, the fans, how can we trust you? How can we trust the game moving forward? How can we be positive? Because yes, we can have good promotional videos and that aspect's all improving, like Jacob said. But if you're not if you're going back to square one and not being honest with the fans and whatnot, then what's the point really? We're going to be having the same argument. So it's about recognizing what you've done wrong in the past and rectifying those errors. And I think, going on platforms like the Global Game, different stuff like that, just trying new things, different stuff. I think that can only serve the APL well moving forward. But I understand, the private owned sort of, organization, and they don't have to sort of, be open in that sense. But I think they've gotten to the stage where they really have just given themselves no option but to be upfront and just say it how it is, really.
Mm. All right, time to show you the money, which is a bit of a theme of the episode, as we'll find out later on. But a couple of other interesting points from this report, Jacob, is that transfer revenue has now eclipsed broadcast revenue. We have some statistics behind this. I think we all understood which way both of those numbers were going.
Yeah.
It was good to see them laid out in front of us. So 17.5 million over the last season. So that's the 24 January, and then the winter window for us. The European summer, with a little more of like add-ons and stuff like that, gets us to a little over 20 million, which is almost double essentially. So 10 million last year, so that's a big improvement. And the PFA think they can back those numbers up as well. They cited a massive global increase in spending, especially in markets which are really relevant to Australian players. So Scotland has doubled their summer spending since 2020. The US, their mid-year spending has quadrupled in the same time period. So not just the fact that Australians are becoming more valuable, people are spending more globally, but especially markets that are actually really considering Australians are spending more as well.
Yeah, I think you said, it's not really a surprise to most people who have been paying attention to this sort of thing. But I think that it sort of marks a shift in global football thinking in a way with regards to these transfers, because look, Australia, I suppose, has always sort of been not neglected but overlooked, I think, a little bit in terms of the player market. And obviously back in the day, many high profile Australians playing in some of the best leagues in the world, and it went quiet for a while, and starting to now sort of see a resurgence of that, where it's still, they're young players who have a lot to prove still, and it's going to take some time to really reap the benefits of it, but we're seeing these good movements and these players you think back even 10 years ago, players were making the move to Europe, but it was to the third division of Germany or something, and then they ended up playing for the reserve side for 3 years before coming back. We're seeing a little bit more of a good approach to the thinking, and that comes down to yes, the clubs. You mentioned clubs in places like Scotland and the US increasing the spending, which is fantastic, but it also comes down to the players and the agents and making sure that they're picking the right moves, and it comes down to the clubs here as well in taking those steps to develop the players as best they can, knowing that, hey, there's a lot of money on the line for us here if we can get it right. And especially with, transfer revenue now, overtaking what, the broadcast revenue, clubs are going to have to keep putting more and more focus on developing players and being able to sell them off to make a lot of money. And, we've spoken about it endlessly on the podcast with squads seemingly trending younger and younger this season. There does seem to be a shift in the thinking here as well that, hey, we need to be working on developing these young players to get them these moves overseas, because it's going to be best for us as a club as well as for the players' opportunities in their career. So I think that all these numbers do really sort of reinforce what we'd already seen. It backs up the eye test in a way, but it's good to see such massive improvement over such a short period of time. And it's something that hopefully it's sustainable. I think it is, with the way that more and more clubs are buying into youth here and really giving them the chance to develop. I think we will see it continue to increase. Hopefully those that have already made their moves, you're thinking, especially recently, your Josh Nisbets, Nestria and Kunda, that they really kick on and do well to continue to uphold the name of Australian players and keep the value there for as long as possible.
I think if I can jump in, sorry, I think the only problem with that is the discrepancy in the competition, because will clubs like Victory and Sydney go down that path? And we've had this discussion pre-season, how this is their opportunity to take advantage of these clubs who are looking in that direction, like Western United, for example. Like, they, in a few years' time, I think that they're going to be in such a great position, developing so much, promising young youth. They've obviously going to building their new stadium, got the facilities, so they're really got everything trending in their direction. But I think the discrepancy between top and bottom, I think that might be a slight issue if certain clubs such as Victory, Sydney, Wanderers, I don't see them sort of going down that path necessarily. Not that they won't in a certain extent, but they've got obviously more funds than someone of a Western United, for example. So I think that could be sort of a balance that the APL might sort of be wary about.
I don't know if you did this on purpose, Jacob, but we do have one very notable player in the third division of Germany in a reserve team. I'm not sure if you did that on purpose or not.
His move wasn't to a third division club.
But it fit the bill.
Just
want to point that out.
It did.
Another financial thing that was noted in this report is that for all the different revenue sources we have, prize money is not often one that we think about as too significant, but now due to the increased payouts in the Asian Champions League, the elite is pretty good, and the AFC 2 is all right as well. And then you throw on the carrot of the stick of potentially qualifying for the FIFA Club World Cup, Christian. The point that the PFA made is that the money on offer in these continental competitions now essentially can be considered as prize money for the A-League champions. So that's one good thing, that, the good teams get rewarded in that way. But also I really like that it incentivizes the Premier's play a little bit more. Obviously, we have this dynamic that everyone knows about in Australian football with the final series, and the Premiership has kind of always been pushed aside. But that's becoming more and more significant. And I think we talked about this with the Mariners last year, but I think it's nice that the kind of the domestic double in terms of the Premiership and the Championship, that's actually getting some real significance now.
Yeah, that's always one thing that's annoyed me in past youth Australian football, where you win the Premier's play and it sort of means nil. It means nothing, because at the end of the day, if you don't win the grand final, then you're not deemed the champions at the end of the day, right? But in terms of the context of a full season, you could argue that you probably deserve to be the champions more so than 2 or 3 games in a final series where anything can happen in 90 minutes of football, right? So I think, yes, that's great that you've got more teams sort of taking that thing seriously about, trying to reach the summit. There's obviously more incentive now, the Club World Cup, as you mentioned, and then the prize money as well between, the Asian Champions League competitions as well, because previously in past seasons, Australian clubs are looking at it as, do we focus more on on in Asia, or do we focus more domestically, financially, what makes more sense for us, right? And more often than not, it was the Australian clubs who opted to sort of take it a bit lighter Champions League football wise, in terms of the travel. Sometimes they played their second string side on occasion because they knew deep down they couldn't compete with these so-called bigger Asian clubs, which was understandable to an extent because the discrepancy was quite large back then, which makes it really, I guess, fascinating that the Wanderers were able to clinch the Champions League title 10 years ago. It really puts into context just how amazing that was. So, yeah, the fact that there's more incentive, more prize money, and yeah, like I mentioned as well, the Club World Cup, that's surely a sort of a cool thing to consider to, okay, we can come up against some of the biggest clubs in the world, every, 2 years? 2 years it is, I think? Four, sorry. So, yeah, again, great incentives, and that just, I guess, drives the competition. And towards the end of the season, you're not going to have 2 or 3 rounds left to say, a team's going to finish first and we're just going to lay down the tools, right? I think it's going to make it more competitive. So that's another factor as well. So yeah, I think all in all, it's great. Good benefits all around.
Which is why I get frustrated with the winner of the Australia Cup going into Asia as well, because it would be so much better if it was just second place in the league. Anyway, I move on. But, the money in Asia has always been a big issue, right? Because, as you say, teams have often gone in there, know they're going to lose money. The good thing for the Mariners, even this year, it's a great example, right? They receive $800,000 for just making the league phase of the ACL Elite, plus $100,000 per win. Unfortunately, they haven't picked up any of those yet. We'll get to that. But it's a good case study, right? So even then, the PFA believe that, worst case scenario teams will at least make profit, which is a good thing. We don't want it to be detrimental to these sides.
Yeah.
And then finally, a fun one to finish off, Jacob. Hindmarsh Stadium knocked off its perch, being consistently ranked as the number 1 stadium in the A-League, but not this season. The Cake Tin had got it on pitch quality, which is one of the 2 rankings. And then Amy Park, specifically for Melbourne Victory games, got you on atmosphere last season. You've been knocked off.
I think because the atmosphere at the games was so rubbish last season because the team was so rubbish. So I put it down to that partially. The pitch was a bit tight. It's been relayed this season, so it'll be interesting to see what rating it gets now with some fresh grass down there. But no, I mean, well deserved for Wellington. For not just the season they had, but the pitch looked fantastic every time they played there. Obviously, we saw the atmosphere at some of those games they played was immense as well. And Amy Park, of course, with the Melbourne Victory, they've got one of the strongest fan bases in the league. You'd hope they're up at the top of the atmosphere rankings
when they're playing well.
When they're playing well, yeah. But I mean, even when they're not, there is still a very, very dedicated and strong fan base. And with a fantastic stadium there as well. So, while it's, everyone always says, oh, you can't watch football at the oval stadiums, Sky Stadium, clearly a good one to do it at. So, it's, I think it's pretty well deserved there. And if there's anybody to be knocked off the top by, it's probably Wellington that you'd be least begrudgingly with.
True. Christian, any guesses as to what the lowest ranked stadium was across both metrics?
I saw this on the rundown. I'm thinking, is this a gotcha question? Am I supposed to know this?
Take a guess.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say Amy Park, Melbourne City. No,
it's got to be Suncorp, right? It's got to be Suncorp.
It's Suncorp Stadium.
Yeah, that's
I'm
true.
disappointed in you. If you read 2 lines down the rundown, you would have figured that out.
I didn't.
So, Suncorp Stadium received a 2-star rating out of 5 for both pitch quality and atmosphere, which, we've well documented the reasons for that. But the segue there is because there may just be a slight glimmer of hope for Perry Park. Just a little one, all right? So Cameron Atfield, who is a reporter for the Brisbane Times, published a piece discussing the 100-day review into the Brisbane Olympic Games that is just commencing at the moment. In it, he conducted an interview with David Hayward, who is chairman of the Queensland branch of the Transport Australia Society. And he says that his organisation is preparing a submission for the review committee, which does include Perry Park. Hayward says, quote, Perry Park would be a true legacy of the Games. We should be optimising our stadium network in the inner city to last us for 100 years, right? And if you look forward 100 years at what stadiums we'd like to have and where we'd like to have them, Perry Park is up there in the top 3. So no promises, Christian. This is extremely, a short straw, a long bow to draw. Pick the analogy you want, but there's just a little glimmer.
How many glimmers have Brisbane Roar fans been, sprinkled over the top to say, this is happening, and then it doesn't eventuate. So you've got to take with a grain of salt, and obviously have to wait a bit and see, if it actually happens or not, because time and time again, how many of these similar types of quotes have come out in the media to say that, okay, this is a real possibility. We've got plans in place behind the scenes. This is going to happen. And then, one thing leads to another, and the government are in disagreements, whether it's, the financial cost or, this and that. So I think, obviously it's going to be another waiting game. Frustrating, of course, the Brisbane supporters, because I think most of them, the majority, feel as though Perry Park would be the ideal solution for them moving forward. We've mentioned on the podcast countless times, Suncorp Stadium just doesn't fit for this version, at least, of the Brisbane Roar side, because under Ange Postecoglou, yes, it was pumping, almost sellouts, especially in the final series, but Brisbane aren't at a stage at a club now where they're experiencing much success. It's very much a rebuilding process. So with that, you're going to expect low attendances, and in terms of a TV product, it's not good viewing. So yes, Perry Park's the answer, but can the government and the clubs get together and finalise a deal or some kind of solution moving forward? Whether it's even planning ahead for the next few years, it doesn't have to be straight away, but at least have something concrete going, because in the meantime, it's just sort of it's been a bit airy. There's been nothing sort of happening. So we'll have to wait and see.
All right, let's get stuck into the football that was played this week. It is now last chance saloon for the Central Coast Mariners as they went down 3-2 to Vissel Kobe, the J1 league leaders, on Tuesday night. Jacob, 1 goal against the team atop of the top tier in Japan. Sounds pretty good. And the Mariners generally have been maybe not pretty good. They've been all right value for some of these narrow losses they've had so far this season. The same is probably true here. Kobe had that 1 good set piece to open it up. Apart from that, just pure chaos. 4 goals, 2 very strange own goals. One off Stormroo, the other created by Stormroo. And then you've got, the deflected shot from Brantman, and then the error from Pirake Colin as well, which is unfortunate for him. Kobe did rotate their lineup a little bit, so maybe that plays to the game. They've got a precarious position atop of J1 at the moment, so they have to be very careful. But at the end of the day, it's just almost an exact repeat of what we've seen from the Mariners so far in the Champions League. Concede early, look kind of average, get a really silly, remarkable goal, and make the last, half an hour kind of interesting. It seems like we're watching the same game over and over again.
Yeah, it's like a copy and paste from round 1. It seems like it doesn't matter what the Mariners do at this point. They're just destined to not get a win in the competition this year, which is a shame, because, a couple of things go differently and they get those wins, but that's the nature of football. It's kind of looking that way for them in the league as well. Obviously got their first win last weekend over the Jets in the F3, but it does look a remarkably different team to the Mariners from last year. We were saying that about the Mariners last year to the Mariners from the year before, but this time it does really feel it as well, where they're just not able to quite get results, where in previous years they might have at least snuck a draw in here or something like that. It's a really tough situation for the Mariners to be in now, because they're in this competition. How many more games have they got now in it?
3.
3 more still to play, and the chances of them qualifying to the next round are getting slimmer and slimmer by each passing round. So it's they find themselves sort of stuck in this obligation to play these games with very little hope that they're actually going to make it out of this first stage, given how things have fallen so far for them. And it's a bit of a shame, because obviously they would have gone in full of confidence and excited to take on the next stage of Asian competition after their triumph last season. But it's just not gone their way, and like I said, that is football. It's the unfortunate reality of it, but perhaps it means that now they're going to start to turn their attention towards the league, which that could be a scary prospect for some of those teams, sort of in that 7 to 5 range on the table, where, you know, the Mariners, if they do start to focus and pull their heads in and get some of these results in the league, you know, they could be challenging for those spots. So look, I mean, it's not their season over, especially not in the league, but at least in Asian competition, it looks like it's going to be pretty slim odds for them to make it out. They'd need to be perfect in the next 3, and then probably have some games go in their favor that are out of their control as well. So yeah, very, very long odds, but you know, part of it is just down to luck, but part of it is the fact that they just weren't good enough as well. And you know, it does look, like I said, a remarkably different Mariners side with a different mentality. They don't quite look up for it as much this time round, which is a bit of a shame, because there is clear talent in this side. You know, we've seen the likes of Alfie McCalmont looks fantastic. Obviously, Mikael Docker is still a really dynamic, explosive player. Bailey Brantman has looked good in the minutes he's got for the side as well. And Parage Cullen has looked very, very good as well, except for the error here. And you know, he now joins a long list of young keepers who have had absolute howlers throughout A-League clubs this season. You know, it's sort of a growing list. We thought maybe he was immune to this. Maybe he was the one, but it's clear that's not the case.
I do kind of feel bad for speaking it into existence. You know, Patrick Beach, Vidakovic, now Parage Cullen, Aluiemi. You know, even throw Adam Pavlicic in there as well for his, you know, stints in the Champions League setup. I guess, look, we've talked about this before. Goalkeepers, the mistakes are much more noticeable, so we talk about them because we see them easier. It's just that the cost factor of it's a better way of looking at the youth in the A-League, right?
Yeah.
It's the clear pros and cons. You're going to have, you know, this upside of being able to sell them on and, you know, young players, and it's great. And then the downside is that they're young and they haven't played as much as your experienced peak age players. So they're going to make mistakes. And if they're a goalkeeper, that usually ends up in a goal. But that's just the nature of football, I guess. Christian, as Jacob said, I think they have to be perfect. 3 games here. 1 against Yokohama F. Marinos at home next week. To give them any sort of chance heading into the new year, they have to win that. And then Johor away in Malaysia and Kawasaki Frontale. It's around March, or maybe February, March, somewhere in there. Tricky fixtures, to say the least. It doesn't actually get easier.
We talked about previous season, the Australian club has been in this competition. I think the Mariners are at that point where just focus on the domestic competition, because I do not see it being perfect.
Well, it's 100K per game, right?
They're playing 3rd, 4th and 5th on the table. So you put it into that perspective. And also you've got Shanghai Port, obviously Kevin Muscat's side, champions of China most recently. They're in 8th. So that just goes to show how tough this competition is to actually try and break through in the top 8. We say, you know, we think of it beforehand to say, okay, we only need to reach the top 8 out of 12 teams. How hard can it be? Well, it's just demonstrated how tough it is, because, you know, only 1 point out of how many games have they played? 5 games, 1 point out of a possible 15. I mean, I expected the Mariners to struggle this season for various reasons, but to get only 1 point, it just, it goes to show, especially the travel aspect as well. You need to have the depth of squad available. Otherwise, you come up against these types of clubs with the spending power and the talent. That's just a class above. Let's be honest. It's a mountain to climb. So I don't see the Mariners winning. They might win 1 game if one of those sides progress and they've got a game to spare where they can rest some players. Maybe I can see that, but other than that, very tricky to see them, you know, surviving and reaching their knockouts.
Well, good news for the Mariners. They actually finally got a shirt sponsor for the Asian Champions League Elite, which is good. Just for the last 4 games, so they've missed out on a little bit of revenue there. But
last 3,
I'm sure they just didn't have a good offer. I'm sure, right? So there you go. There's the more reality of football for you. We're going to take a break now. We're going to go watch the Sydney FC and the Matildas game, and then we'll be back to chat about those. See you then. All right, we're back a little bit later on, significantly later than we thought. Okay, first of all, because the Tillies game didn't actually kick off at 9 o'clock. It kicked off at like 9:15 because they did the whole Polkinghorn thing, which was nice. I can give them that. But then what do we have, like 11 minutes that went into like 13?
11 in the second half, and then what was it, 7 in the first?
Seven in the first half.
For a friendly in the Matildas game.
Well, why couldn't they do the tribute to Clay Polkinghorn 15 minutes before 9 o'clock?
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, it's like a friendly, so they have control over it, right? So they say it's 9 o'clock, so everyone's watching on the broadcast. And then
Yeah.
It happens. Anyway, we're going to get on with this, is what I'm trying to get down here. So let's start with Sydney FC. 4-1 win. Comprehensive, Jacob. They were significantly the better side. We know they left Andrew Redmayne and Douglas Costa at home. Didn't seem to impact them much. Anis Waheem got benched for the derby, had 45 minutes in the second half, had 90, or maybe not 90 minutes, but he had most of the game here, and has got, what, are we thinking 4 goals and like 2 assists or something in that game and a half of football?
Yeah.
Definitely the standout.
He's quality. We mentioned it on the live stream that, with a Sydney side that's got the likes of Joe Lolly, Leo and Douglas Costa sort of taking the limelight, and that's why him has had a massive impact. And, I think that if he was to go down injured, Sydney would really, feel his loss. But he's just been a fantastic performer for them since he's come in. And a lot of people actually did peg him when he first signed for Sydney, saying, watch out for this guy because he could be the one that really takes this Sydney side to the next level, and that's what we've seen so far. He just has such a really good touch on the ball, fantastic vision, really good weight to his passes, and he can finish the ball well as well, which is what we saw today. So 3 goals in this game, obviously against weaker opposition here in Eastern, but you've still got to put the goals past them to win a game, and that's what he did. And when you've got a Sydney side that are playing such dynamic attacking football and they're taking these chances so well, they're obviously a huge threat, and they're looking really, really comfortable. What's their lead now at the top of the ACL2? Is it?
It's not a lead.
It's not a lead
because Sanfrecce are up. So they would have started at 11 o'clock.
Right.
Because Sanfrecce beat them twice, right? So they're second.
They were
That's
trailing
right,
1-0
yes.
Sanfrecce when I last saw.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
No way.
I don't
Well,
know the
Sydney
score
FC
now.
actually wants Sanfrecce to win because then it would lock up. Yes, no. If Sanfrecce get a result in this game here tonight, then Sydney are through in second.
That's
place.
right. That's right.
They're
yeah.
losing 1-0 after 34 minutes, so it could be a shock.
So, yeah, it could leave the door open for Sydney to get top.
Yeah.
But it also leaves the door open for them to get eliminated,
So not
which sounds a lot like another Australian team in Asian qualification at the moment.
Yes.
Anyway, so, I mean, they're pretty much through, Christian.
Yeah.
They'd have to have a lot of results go against them, and they'd have to lose their final game at home against Kaya. So they got to be feeling pretty comfortable and knowing that they, have the week off in the A-League as well, get to rest and then have that game midweek next week and wrap up qualification, then get back into the league.
Yeah, for Tale, it's a great opportunity in these last games to, I guess, rest a couple more players. Obviously, you didn't see Costa or Redmayne, as you mentioned, in this match, and it gave others, a sort of a chance to shine. But in this starting 11, you still had the likes of Joe Lolly, Klamala starting. So there was still, a fair bit of experience in there. Hayden Matthews, Ryan Grant at the back. I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of those names, get rested towards the back end of this group phase. So, I mean, all in all, looks pretty smooth sailing for Sydney. It just goes to show what depth can do, right? Because, the derby, as you mentioned, Waheem on the bench and then just comes in, hat-trick, just like nothing's happened, It's just funny just how stacked this team is. It's quite scary. So, a lot of options for Tale. Interesting to see how he goes about it. But we knew coming into this before this competition started that Sydney should be one of the favourites to really progress deep and arguably really etch their name on the trophy and perhaps win this thing. They really are such a strong side. I know there's 1 or 2 other clubs from memory who will pose a really strong chance as well. But from early signs, they indicate that Sydney looking a good shout to win this thing.
Yeah, Jeonbuk Hyundai, I
that's
believe,
the
is
one.
going to be the other big team from Korea in the Champions League 2 that's going to be competing on the east side of things. While we're talking about competition in Asia, Jacob, I know you're bored of me talking about this, but I have to bring it up. The AFC Club Coefficient.
Yeah.
After the Mariners' loss on Tuesday nights, Australia dropped down to 7th in the live rankings in the east of Asia. So that is below China and Thailand, like we have been, and of course Japan and Korea, but then below Vietnam and Malaysia as well, which is frightening. And that actually leaves us outside of a Champions League elite spot, not even a qualification, just the ACL2, 1+1 in the ACL2. Thankfully, since Sydney FC's win tonight, we've jumped back up into 5th, but it just shows you what those margins are like, right? Because you average the scores together, and you have a country like Vietnam, who only has one entry, Nam Dinh, in the Champions League 2. They win a couple of games, their points aren't cut in half by a team that is performing poorly in the Champions League Elite. So that is the struggle of being in this position. In order to get ourselves up into the places where we can, get more teams in the Champions League Elite, and like we talked about earlier, Jacob, take advantage of all that prize money. We actually have to compete in the Champions League Elite in the first place to get enough points to have the right to do that.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? It's just be better and win games, which is
It's
easier
so
said than
simple.
it was.
It is.
Yeah, it's easier said than done, obviously.
Yeah.
And Australian teams have always struggled in the top level of Asian football. So, it's sort of, I suppose, a curse. There's only really been a few occasions where Australian teams have gone deep in the tournament and looked solid. Obviously, Adelaide United back in 2008, the Wanderers when they won it all. Lucky you mentioned on the live stream as well, Victory in that COVID year were doing a decent job as well.
Okay, yeah.
They were okay, which by Australian standards is, miraculous. It's, I mean, you raised a good point in the live stream about the salary cap obviously being a hindrance for Australian clubs. And then Paletti tried to convince you for about 15 minutes that it wasn't, which was an interesting argument. But,
I'll have to watch it back.
but yeah, no, I mean, Australian clubs, yeah, look, financially not in the same position that some of these other sides are. So it's going to come down to just playing good football. And again, that's easier said than done, but you look at what Sydney can do, and they're one of those sides that really stick out as being the sort of team that could take the game to Asian clubs and are taking the game to Asian clubs and really dominating. So, we sort of had a discussion about which teams in the league we'd think at the moment would be best positioned to gain us some coefficient points. And yeah, look, with the margins so tight, it's just unfortunate that Australia, like you mentioned, Lockie, has one in the top level and then one in the ACL2, so that you've got everything being split down the middle, and the Mariners have just really, really struggled in that competition. So it means that for as well as Sydney have done outside of their games against Sanfrecce, it's not counting for a huge amount in terms of coefficient points, because the Mariners are still just sort of, I don't want to say dragging Australia down, but when you look at the numbers, that's what it suggests.
Yeah, it's tricky. And it's just allowing Thailand and China to open up a bigger lead. And if you look at the numbers, the way the points fall off over the rolling 8-year period, we kind of have a 3 to 4 year window where they lose a lot more points than what we do. So it would be that 3 to 4 years that we'd hope to be above them, but we're making it very difficult for ourselves. Let's go to the Tillies. We're not going to tackle this one in too much detail because obviously we have our team over at the Dubcast that will talk really in depth about it, as they do with all the stuff in the women's games. But Christian, a really fiery friendly. Of course, the Matildas have a bit of a history with Brazil. We seem to play them in friendlies a lot, home and away. It's kind of that team that's around our level that keeps popping up that if they want to get these not competitive minutes into. But yeah, really, really fiery. We saw the red card. The players are going in at each other. Caitlin Ford and Hayley Razzo really not happy at moments. And a 3-1 loss as well, which is not the way you would have wanted to see the window start.
No, right from the outset, I thought obviously Polkinghorne's farewell tour, the start of it, had that presentation. I thought that actually took a bit out of the players. You can tell emotionally, perhaps they weren't sort of in the zone in the first half, because Brazil came absolutely flying out of the blocks. There was no tomorrow. The intensity, I thought, was absolutely insane. You can tell they were really up for it, and the Matildas were just, I guess, half asleep, really. 2 quick goals to Brazil. Played some good football as well, and Australia just looked a bit lost out there, struggling for answers. Yes, it was really physical. I think in the commentary, Grace Gill mentioned that she warned that she spoke to former Matildas players about this particular match, and how physical the Brazilians are, and how this fixture always poses a challenge for the Matildas, and it was certainly the same here. Brazil have been one of those nations recently in years past who have sort of had to rediscover their identity a bit. Now with Marta sort of outgoing, they're starting to bring in a new generation. You could see that there was a bit more flair, a bit more sort of more patterns of play, a bit more identity about them. So yeah, from a Matildas perspective, a bit disappointing to start this bit of tour of friendlies, in a disappointing fashion. But I guess, look, at the end of the day, Tom Samani, we know that he's not going to be staying here long term. He's just a sort of a stopgap, isn't he? Until the FA find a new coach, whoever that may be. They're still obviously taking their time to make that decision, which is fair enough because you want to make the right call, considering that there's not going to be a real competitive fixture in quite a while. So
it's the Asian Cup. That's the next competitive one.
Yeah, exactly. So at the same time, though, you still want to try and be careful and make the best decision possible.
Sure.
So, in this game, I think, look, a couple of players missing for the Matildas. We know the likes of Sam Kerr. Obviously, the experience has been missing for a while, though. But I thought Caitlin Ford was probably the one real standout as well, along with Kyra Cooney-Cross. I thought in midfield, she did well throughout the game. So, a couple of positives, but all in all, I thought Brazil definitely deserved the win.
Jacob, you tend to very consistently nod your head when Kyra Cooney-Cross's name gets mentioned.
Yeah, love her. I think she's a really, really quality player. Obviously, I'm biased as an Arsenal fan, but no, she's a terrific midfielder. I think just the versatility that she has to her game is fantastic. We've seen her play as a lone six as part of a double pivot. We've seen her play in the half spaces in this game. So yeah, just her versatility opens so much up for the Matildas. And another player who I thought had a fantastic game as well was Ellie Carpenter. Her work rate is insane. She obviously really created that chance that led to the Caitlin Ford goal. It was a great leave by Van Egmond, I believe it was, to let it go between her legs, and a good touch from Ford, turn and hit, but it all came from Carpenter just keeping the ball in the corner 2v1 and able to get the cross off. And I thought that she worked really hard all game, and very deserving of getting that assist to her name, because she put in a lot of hard work playing in this system with those wing backs, where she was asked to do a lot of tracking up the pitch, but also getting back to defend as well. And I thought that, for as hot as it wasn't necessarily hot, but it was very humid there in Brisbane. And we could see the Brazil players in particular were affected by it, a lot of them going down throughout the game. She just kept running the whole time. And I thought that was a real good display from her. And, there was some good signs from that, from the Tilly's team. I think that it was just, defensively just too open, I think, was the problem. And we sort of joked about it, Lockie, there with they were playing with the Sydney FC rest defence.
That was a bit of an exaggeration from me.
But it was very, very open in transition. And so, that's probably something to focus on for the team to try and tighten things up. But there were good passages of play and some good individual performances.
All right, very nice. Plenty more Tilly's content, of course. There's 3 more games in this international window. We're going to get a look at a lot more of the up-and-comers, the A-League talent in those back 2 against Chinese Taipei as well. So if you want more of them, of course, the Dubcast, Wednesday mornings. Let's go to our weekend look for the A-League men. What are we up to now? Round 6, I believe. We're getting into it, aren't we? The ins and outs published on Thursday. Melbourne City get back Aziz Bayic from suspension and Ariane Soleimani from injury, which is a very important position. Mehmeti did well in striker against Perth, but that's Perth glory, as we keep saying. So that's at least Vidmar has options in the number 9.
Yeah. Not the last time I'll mention Perth in this podcast, by the way.
No, it's not. No, it's not. The Wanderers lose Jong Tae-wook. He's reportedly picked up a niggle in training, set to be out for a couple of weeks. MacArthur Jedru is back in the squad. Western United get back Ollie Laval and Tomoki Imai for the injured Sebastian Pasquale and suspended Dylan Leonard, of course.
That's huge.
That's a massive one, isn't it, Jacob?
Yeah. Those two in particular. Pasquale is such a big part of Western have a really good midfield unit, but Pasquale is a really good playmaker, and Dylan Leonard has just been incredible so far this season. The young centre-back obviously scored the goal at Unite round and then got sent off, which is a bit of a shame, hence why he's suspended, but he's looked like a really quality player for Western United, a side that is very, very young and is asking a lot of their young players, and he's one that's definitely stepped up, so they'll definitely feel his absence, because Tomoki Imai is he's a proven A-League defender, but I don't think there's quite the upside there to his game that you get with Dylan Leonard. So a bit of a shame that he's suspended for this one.
All right, Christian, hit me with a burning question.
My burning question, I've taken it off you, Lockie. It is, are the Jets the Kiwi specialists? So obviously Rob Stanton's comments last week, not happy with the board and what's been going on there behind the scenes, a bit of a shock. But if you cast your mind back to last season, the Jets were actually the only side to win away from home in Wellington, I believe, during the regular season. They won 3-0 early stages of the season. Thought, well, where did that result come from? I just think the Jets are one of those sides who can sort of spring one of these upsets. And Auckland, obviously, vying for that 5th consecutive clean sheet, will tie the record for the Mariners, the 2007-08 team, when they went their first 5 games with 5 clean sheets. That'd be a tremendous achievement, given Auckland, obviously, just completely new to the competition. So obviously it's a tall order for the Jets, but I think away from home, look, last time they played in Auckland, they beat the Phoenix 1-0. So they have got a fairly good track record over there. I wouldn't be surprised if I see an upset here.
Interesting. Okay, I'll go next. And my burning question is, what on earth will come out of the chaos that is Melbourne City versus the Western Sydney Wanderers? 2 teams with just so many question marks around them. Obviously, in terms of selection, you got Juan Mata, you got the striker positions we talked about for Melbourne City. It could look so many different ways. Like, even just the question of where Nathaniel Atkinson is going to play. He's going to play left back. Is he going to play right back? Is he going to play in midfield? Like, who knows? If you put him on the wing, like Marco Tilio's out. Like, what are you going to do? So many question marks around those 2 teams. It's going to be plenty of chaos, and I'm looking forward to watching it on Saturday afternoon. Jacob.
Mine is, can Brisbane finally get a result? Because let's not forget, they don't have a point this season. Perth have a point. This Perth team has a point. Brisbane don't have a point. Can Brisbane actually do something this week and get a result? Even a point, even a draw is a start. But to start the season without a single point, Lockie, are you ever going to write them off?
No. In fact, I'm going to make a countersuit here. I want to give a shout out to a couple of my fellow Brisbane apologists, Ben Homer, Alex Molkanoff. I believe the boys, Ben Gruccio and Stephen Walk on Football Friends, were also sympathetic. They've had a rough start to their season, and it's nice to hear a few other voices in the media coming out and making that point widely known. Okay, because get ready for the roar, they're coming.
Yeah, but then your worst case scenario is.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. Oh, wait, no, that's the next one.
We are up to it, yeah.
You've done a good segue, haven't you?
Yeah, that was a fantastic segue.
You can tell it's getting late in the night. You gave me a great segue and I shot it back. My worst case scenario is that Brisbane lose their first 5. It really would be bad. And it's tough because MacArthur are a decent side as well. We know what they can do. But no matter how good your team's potential can be, no matter how hard you've worked in preseason, and no matter what the fixture list is to start the season, at some point, if you keep losing, it becomes a habit, and all the positivity that you've brought up is just going to disappear. So 5 is pushing it. I'm not sure what the record for most losses to start a season is. I imagine it can't be too many more than 5. And Perth Glory are not going to break that record. So if Brisbane Roar were to do it, then that would definitely be a worst case scenario. Christian.
Mine is, I'm going for a low crowd attendance at the Western United v Melbourne Victory game. I think, obviously, this game was supposed to originally be played at Ironbark Fields, and I think it was because of some policing issues. Security, yeah. So they've moved it back to Amy Park. So essentially, it's really a Victory home game, if you think about it. So, I mean, it'd be I think a disaster if we see a low attendance figure, because it is technically it's going to be a Western United home game still. So yeah, it wouldn't be a good look, because I just think it should be played at Ironbark Fields. It just robs those fans over there the experience of watching, such a big fixture. It is a derby after all, right? 2 Melbourne teams, and then they've got to travel all the way to Amy Park. So, I mean, because of policing issues, I'm sure that shouldn't be, what do they get, 2,000-3,000 there anyway? I mean,
you're going to get the Victory fans. That's the issue, right?
Yeah.
So they're going to start trouble.
Well, it's more the fact that you got a derby, a heated atmosphere, and not appropriate separation and protection. And anyway, I don't know. The police know more about it.
Just get the orange cones out and then separate.
Get the orange cones out.
Orange cones out.
That will stop the buckets, will it?
Yeah.
All right. Worst case scenario, Jacob.
Yeah, mine's staying with the same match. It's not really a worst case scenario for anyone other than Patrick Kisnorbo, but Bruno Fornaroli scores a goal off the bench because he came close at Unite round. He had a very good free kick that was forced a good save from Alua Yemi. And we keep hearing PK in press conferences bringing up Jing Reese in when the striker question is asked, and he's yet to really show the goods. So if Reese gets the nod again and Bruno comes off the bench and scores and is effective, then it's going to be a bad look for Kisnorbo.
Interesting. And then for our ping from distance, we all collectively came up with one. We couldn't decide who was going to say it. We had a brainstorming period, but it's almost midnight now. We couldn't come up with anything. Christian, I'll let you have the honours. We're doing one all together.
It is Perth Glory to win. I think this is going to be our prediction every week. Because until Perth actually get a win, I think this is going to be our ping from distance every single week until they actually get the job done and get 3 points. Because, we're all just sitting here before the podcast thinking, what on earth are we going to pick? Because literally, you look at these 5 games and there wasn't really one. I think for me, I had the Jets, but I already had that for my burning question. So I sort of let that one slip. And so, it's probably just Perth to win. I just can't see anything else.
Perth to win. I like it, Jacob.
Let's go. Yeah, sure. Perth to win. I don't think it's going to happen, but that's the point of this, right? Yep. It's very
away to Adelaide. If anyone's wondering who they're playing against.
The one of the 2 undefeated teams in the league. At one of the stadiums that is usually ranked number 1 for atmosphere. Not last year.
Yeah, not anymore.
Usually, not anymore. All right, we got to get out of here. So that will do for this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. We thank you as always for tuning in. Jacob Stevens, I know you've had a long day, early start tomorrow. I appreciate you coming.
That's all right. We'll always make time for this. It's always good fun.
Thank you. Christian Montegan, I'm assuming you got about 5 hours of tennis starting in a second or something like that?
It's actually the off-season, so whole December off-season, bit of a rest, and then, hopefully Australian Open.
Of course, because the team events have just finished, haven't they?
They have, yes. So, 3-4 week break and, start again.
So you're going to be around a little bit more than usual, and then you're just going to disappear off the face of the earth for 3 weeks.
Well, I could do the podcast in Rod Laver Arena, whatever you decide.
That would be interesting. Okay. Thank you all again very much for listening. We'll be back on Tuesday with your regular A-League chat. There are a couple other stories that we wanted to touch on tonight regarding Melbourne Victory's finances and a couple other sponsorship things, but simply ran out of time. So we'll bring you on that next week. But we'll see you then. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.